Navy SEALs are among the most elite military units in the world. The BUDS training has a pass rate ranging from 20 to 30%, and it ends in a brutal 4-day challenge called Hell Week, where you spend 4 days and nights training continuously with only 4 hours sleep total. And yet, the physical requirement in order to take part in this training is only to be able to do 6 to 10 pull-ups. The sources vary slightly, and in order to be competitive, it's recommended you be able to do 15 to 20, but the point is it's not that much. Physical fitness and strength, they are not the most important criteria for becoming a Navy SEAL. So what is? That would be mental toughness, the ability to go through such rigorous and grueling training and not give up, not quit, hence the dropout rates. And the same is true if you look at many different historical warrior cultures. The Spartans in particular did not train like athletes or like bodybuilders. Instead, they focused primarily on being able to perform whether it was blisteringly hot or freezing cold at high altitudes and on little sleep. They'd wear a cloak made out of thin material called a phoinicus and sustain themselves on something called black broth. They're intentionally not given enough, and they were encouraged, if they needed more, to try and steal it from other students. And there was harsh punishment if they were caught stealing, even though it was encouraged. They wore bare feet, and they were challenged to do things like ripping weeds out of riverbeds for hours on end. This kind of training wasn't about building strength and mass, but instead building a kind of warrior's mindset that would allow them to keep training, keep pushing themselves, no matter what the conditions. This mental toughness is something that is of course a huge asset in productivity, in working out and getting into shape, and it's something that we could all cultivate more. Unfortunately, our lifestyles are so comfortable, we're so unused to being uncomfortable, that we often will collapse at the first sign of challenge. Using a little bit of this kind of training, we can get past that and therefore stay committed to our goals, no matter what mood we're in. So what is mental toughness really? Well, we could liken it to a psychological trait known as hardiness, first suggested by psychologist Coma. Hardiness describes our ability to thrive in, or at least endure, highly stressful experiences. Someone who is hardy is able to continue working to stay focused and even healthy, despite being extremely stressed for long periods. Of course, this is extremely useful for somebody going through something like Hell Week. CEOs and managers are often found to have high levels of hardiness. They're able to focus despite being extremely stressed. This is actually why a lot of psychopaths end up becoming highly successful CEOs, and that's something I'm going to return to in a future video. Hardiness can also prevent something called learned helplessness, which is kind of the opposite of hardiness. This is where you learn to give up, where you've failed so many times that you just stop trying, and this is linked with depression and a host of other mental health issues. And in one study it was found that the very top performing elite athletes and military personnel would demonstrate a heightened arousal during highly stressful activities, but also greater sympathetic response at rest. In other words, they could get more amped up, more psyched up when they were training or when they were facing a challenge or when they were in warfare. However, when they were relaxing, when they were grabbing that downtime, they were able to calm down much quicker and feel less stressed. This was important for recovery, which then would allow them to go again harder when they needed to. Of course, if you were going through Hell Week and you only had 4 hours of sleep, you need to make every hour count, and so this would become extremely important. This has also been linked in other research to higher levels of neuropeptide Y and DHEA in the brain. DHEA is known to buffer the effects of cortisol in the hippocampus. In other words, it allows us to maintain use of our higher order cognitive functions, to plan ahead, to think strategically, even when we're highly stressed. Whether this is something innate or whether it's something that can be trained is unclear. Certain nootropics and herbs can also increase the production of DHEA and neuropeptide Y, in particular adaptogens such as ashwagandha, and I have done a video on creating a flow stack, so check that out if you want to learn more about that. But what's also really important is metacognition. Metacognition is thinking about thinking, in other words, reflecting on your thought patterns and how they're going to influence your mood and your motivation and discipline. So what kind of strategies and techniques can you use in order to make yourself more disciplined and to increase mental toughness? One example is something called eating the whole elephant. This rather strange sounding example refers to the ability to break down what is an overwhelming seeming task into smaller, much more manageable chunks. So in this example, you're tasked with eating an entire elephant for some reason, and just thinking about that is enough to make you want to give up. So instead of thinking about that, you instead focus on each mouthful, each small plate. That way it becomes much easier to just gruel through, to focus on those small challenges so that the big macro goal takes care of itself. In the gym, instead of trying to do 1 minute of battle ropes, it might mean instead that you're doing 6 times 10 seconds of battle rope. 10 seconds is nothing, you can do 6 of those, right? Another strategy is something called 4x4x4, and this is a breathing technique that I have touched on this channel in the past, and it's also used by yogis and several others. It's also called box breathing. In order to use this type of breathing, you'll breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, and then hold your breath for 4 seconds. By doing this, you not only bring your focus internally, but you also send signals via the vagus nerve to your autonomic nervous system. In other words, you're calming yourself down, you're telling yourself that everything's okay. This is sometimes referred to as arousal control, and there are many other techniques you can use too, such as meditation or anchoring, etc. Another very interesting one is something called a non-reactivity. This is basically the mental toughness equivalent of a flow state. So you're tuning out, you're zoning out, and you're leaving your thoughts behind. Instead of stressing and worrying about how challenging what you're doing is or how much further you have to go, you're instead just forgetting all that and focusing on that moment. It's a little bit like mindfulness. If you push yourself hard enough and long enough, then you'll probably experience this naturally. Swimmers experience something similar, and they call that a swim coma, where they just forget about everything and just keep doing stroke by stroke until they complete their goal. Once you've achieved this once, you'll find it's easier to get back into this state and to tap into huge reserves of energy you didn't know you had. But you can also improve your chances of acquiring it by using mindfulness meditation and by adopting a Stoic mindset. Stoic philosophy teaches us not to worry about trying to create a perfect life for ourselves, not trying to make everything comfortable and nice, but instead just accepting that bad things happen and all you can control is your reaction to that. By doing this, you learn to detach yourself from what's happening and to just do what needs to be done. Finally, another form of metacognition you can use to enhance your mental toughness is something called CBT, or cognitive behavioural therapy. This is a psychotherapeutic tool which basically involves looking at the contents of your thoughts and what's negative, what's damaging, and then replacing those with more positive and useful thoughts. I've done a whole video on this in the past, so I won't beat a dead horse now, but suffice to say that by identifying which thoughts are leading you to quit and then eliminating those, you can make it much harder for yourself to give up when the going gets rough. For instance, if you're going for a long run or if you're carrying kettlebells for a farmer's walk, you might feel your body screaming and then give up because in the back of your mind, you think you're going to injure yourself if you don't. This isn't a conscious thought, you don't actually think you're going to injure yourself, but if you dig really deep, there's a small element of that, and you use that as an excuse to put down the weights and to sit down for a bit. However, David Goggins suggests something called the 40% rule. The 40% rule tells us that when our body starts telling us to quit, and when we think we've used up all of our reserves, we've actually only used 40%. You have another 60% in the tank. Whilst that's a very general, sweeping statement, there is some truth in it, and you can certainly carry those kettlebells an extra 100 meters with no worries of injuring yourself and feeling it too badly the next day. Likewise, I've done some personal reflection and found that when I'm feeling tired or too exhausted to work or be productive or to work out, it often comes down to the fact that I'm trying to kind of preserve my tiredness, and at the same time I'm trying to communicate with other people that I'm tired so I don't get asked to do stuff. This isn't a conscious attempt to shirk my responsibilities, it's a kind of deep down subtle thing, but I know it's there now and I can address it. If I exercise, if I get productive, I'll have a boost of energy and I can get more done, and actually that's a much better thing to communicate to other people as well. There's no point getting disheartened and sulking when something goes wrong, there's no point giving up when the going gets tough, so why do you do it? Time to do some soul searching. All these tips are great on paper and they can certainly be useful, but they're not going to do much unless you actually try putting them into practice. In other words, put yourself in those positions, in those situations where the going is tough and where you have to push through. Like I said at the start of this video, we're all too used to being comfortable and we're all too unused to being uncomfortable. And so this is something you need to reintroduce into your life. David Goggins describes this as building calluses for your mind. Just like you train your muscles, just like you might train your memory, you can also train your mental toughness and your hardiness. If you already work out, and this is a step in the right direction, however, you probably work out in a nice warm, plush health spa and just for a set period of time where you set the rules, and that's not really enough. Instead, how about getting outside, training barefoot in the cold, and doing things that you find really uncomfortable? Maybe add some fat grips to your weights to make them thicker so it hurts your arms, and challenge yourself with things that you don't find easy, that don't come naturally. Don't do more of what you're good at. Don't get stronger if you're already really strong. How about improving your mobility? Get yourself outside your comfort zone, and that's how you'll build that kind of mental toughness. Likewise, how about working out a lot when you're very tired, or just pushing yourself really far by setting challenges for yourself? How about working out in the snow or working out fasted? US memory champion Ron White described how he hired a Navy SEAL in order to help train him for competition. And one of the things that Navy SEAL taught him was not to memorize cards on land in a nice warm environment with the kids shut out of the room with complete silence, but rather to try and memorize them underwater in scuba gear. The thought was that if he could memorize a pack of cards underwater, then doing so on land would be easy. Likewise, when Ron found himself very ill one day, his coach forced him to carry on training anyways, because he said, what would you do if you were ill on the day? I've often thought, what would Batman do if he was attacked by all his enemies at once on a day when he had a really bad cold? Of course, he's Batman, so he would have trained for that as well. Just to be clear, I'm not recommending that you do anything that's going to cause you harm. I'm not recommending that you do super high repetitions of deadlifts, for instance. CrossFit can help you develop fantastic mental toughness, but it's not a good idea to injure yourself in the process. That's why I think it's a much better idea to do this sort of thing using push-ups or even farmers' walks, something that's far less likely to cause injury. Likewise, I don't recommend that you sleep deprive yourself, but you can, if you're already sleep deprived, force yourself to train anyways, once again using only very simple movements that won't cause an injury. Likewise, I don't recommend that you work out ill. Likewise, you can make other things less comfortable too. Taking cold showers is fantastic for building mental toughness, and at the same time it's actually really healthy for you. Likewise, training outside in the cold or training in bare feet is really healthy for you. You can mimic Ron by training yourself to be more effective in work by working in less comfortable environments. That's why I might start trying to force myself now occasionally to work to the same level, even when there is a noise behind me or a distraction. That way, when I come back to work and it's quiet, I should find it much easier to be that much more productive, that much more consistently. One of the very simplest things you can do is to work out when you're not feeling like it, when you're just tired at the end of a day. If you have the mental toughness to work out, even if it's just for 10 minutes when you really don't feel like it, then not only will you find it easier to stick to anything you don't want to do, to chase after any goal, but at the same time, you'll get into much better shape much more quickly, simply because you're able to train whenever you get the opportunity. If you can develop that kind of mental toughness and if you can incorporate it into your training, then I think you'll see fantastic results, and it might actually be more game-changing than any change in your technique or any new exercise protocol. In short, stop trying to find ways to make your workouts easier and more comfortable. Find ways to make them harder and more difficult, and see that as part of the workout. So I hope you found this video useful and interesting, guys. If you did, then please leave a like, comment down below and let me know if you have any tips for building mental toughness. Subscribe if you want to see more like this. I have lots more on the way. And of course, guys, you can still get my ebook and full training program, Super Functional Training, from the link in the description down below. And of course, I'll see you next time. Thanks a ton, and bye for now.